Idiopathic is a fancy Greek word that means we don't know what's going on. A colleague said to me, "Would you like to go to a lecture on energy healing?" My normal reaction would be no, because that's obviously bogus. But because I trusted my friend Richard, I went. I felt that same pressure sensation over his phantom leg. He opened his eyes and he said, "Doc, what are you doing?" He could feel me touching his phantom, which,
Wow.
shouldn't happen. My baseline was being measured, and then at some point, 4 meditators came in, sat behind me, and within like 5 seconds, my heart coherence measurements went through the roof. So it was like a really clear proof that there's a group energy field. They tracked the effect on the crime rate in Washington, D.C. How could there be any interaction? And yet it was an exact correlation. The crime rate went down 25% during that.
Wow.
Certain places on the planet have more of this energy than others. So Sedona is one. Places like Stonehenge in Avebury, there's something there. It's been called a crop circle. Where do they come from, and what is the source of these patterns that imprint themselves somehow or other? Things are not working out so well for the world as a whole these days. There's just a lot coming to a head where it's looking like the old ways of doing things are not up to the task. And I think that also pushes people to consider something different.
All right, so I'm super excited for today. One of the things that I've always wanted to do was to bring more, just proof, more science, more of the studies that have been done throughout the years when it regards to energy healing, just to prove, how it works, that it works, right? With pain relief and a lot of other things that we work on, right? So I'm super excited today. Our special guest is Eric Leskowitz. I call him Rick as well. He has an MD and served as a consultant psychiatrist for over 25 years with the pain management program at Spaulding Rehabilitation Hospital in Boston, where he also founded the Integrative Medicine Task Force. Okay, he also holds an appointment as a research affiliate with the Osher Institute for Integrative Medicine Research at Harvard Medical School. Okay, cool thing about Rick, I've read his book, watched his interviews. I mean, he's he is an outlier, this guy, right? Like a really forward thinker, things outside of the box, right? And I'm super fascinated with his story because he studied energy healing, meditation and hypnosis for over 40 years, presenting workshops on the integration of, subtle energy techniques and theories, right, with, the allopathic medical model. So I feel like, when I look at, Western medicine and the allopathic medical model and energy healing, I feel like they're, moving forward, there's a place where both, can coexist and support each other, right? And it's just fascinating that he's been able to do that with his work. And he's also written over 50 articles, that are published in leading scientific journals, okay? He's the author of the book that I just got from, Amazon a few weeks back called The Mystery of Life Energy, biofield healing, right? Phantom limbs, group energetics, and Gaia consciousness, right? And he's done a lot of different things. And that book you guys can get actually, if you enjoy this interview, go head onto Amazon, type in The Mystery of Life Energy, of Life Energy, right? And you're gonna see the book by Rick there, and it's an amazing book for those looking for proof and research and all that good stuff. All right. So without further ado, I'm gonna bring on Rick here so you can hear more about him and his wisdom and his knowledge, his story, his research. For over 40 years of really studying energy healing, and I'm just excited to bring him to you. All right, so everybody, let's welcome Rick. I'll give it up to Rick. All right, Rick.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me on your show and to meet all these folks. I'm glad to talk with you.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I've been doing my research, and you popped up, and I was like, okay, let me look into this do your work, and I was just like, I was just fascinated with your interviews and your books, and yeah. So let's start off with your story. I mean, did you always, were you always into this woo woo stuff, or how did it all begin for you?
No, actually, it's pretty ironic looking back because I was totally on the other side for many years. I grew up in a family that was really into science. My dad was a research scientist. He studied immunology and what you can inject into rats to make them make antibodies and things like that. And it was leading edge, but I really liked looking into a microscope and going to the lab and things like that. I was a good student, so that was my track to be like a science nerd. And in college, that's what I was doing pre-med studies. But that was also in the late 60s and early 70s where there was a whole spirit of rebellion. And I got caught up in that. And so part of it was political, the anti-war movement and not trusting authority. But that theme also carried over into, scientific authority too, not to trust it just because some doctor said it. And I also will confess that I experimented with altered states of consciousness using certain herbal preparations that are now legal, but it's actually unbelievable that you don't have to look over your shoulder to obtain marijuana these days. But so I was doing some of that, and I wasn't really sure how to combine it all. So I fortunately took some time off after college before medical school, and that made a big difference because I traveled a lot. I spent some time in a kibbutz in Israel. I met my wife there. We traveled overland to India, and we saw that different people do things differently. When it comes to medicine, it can be like sticking needles in your skin or taking pellets of herbs and things that didn't fit in my model. So I was a little bit opened up when I went to medical school. And it was very frustrating to be in medical school because I learned a new vocabulary word pretty much the first day. The word is idiopathic, and that was how they described many, many diseases. You have a case of idiopathic hypertension or something like that. And it turns out idiopathic is a fancy Greek word that means we don't know what's going on, but it sounds impressive. So people say, oh, well, okay. So I was always wanting to find out why these things happen, and there wasn't really a good explanation in the medical model. Fortunately, in that time off, I had learned how to meditate. TM, transcendental meditation, was big back then, and I figured, if it was good enough for the Beatles, well, I could give it a shot. So I went into medical school knowing that. And at that time, that particular medical school I was at, it was University of Massachusetts. There was a young researcher who was just starting to study the effect of meditation on different health issues. His name was John Kabat-Zinn, who's very big in that world now, but he was unpublished at that time. But it opened my mind to the possibilities. Stress was finally recognized as being important, and so I pursued that in psychiatry special training, the way the mind can influence the body and the immune system and things like that.
Is that what psychoneuroimmunology comes in, right?
Right, that's the PNI if you like acronyms, but that's exactly what it was. And I was fortunate to study with one of the leaders in the field. But even that was fairly conventional. It didn't say anything about energy. What really changed was my first real job was in the VA at an outpatient clinic in Boston. And a colleague said to me, would you like to go to a lecture on energy healing?
Mm.
And normally, my normal reaction would be no, because that's obviously bogus and healing is, laying on of hands in the Bible. And I had a Jewish background, so Jesus was not the top of my pantheon. But because I trusted my friend Richard, I went. And it was a lecture by a woman named Rosalind Bruyere, who's a well-known healer in Los Angeles. And what was different about her was that she worked with doctors and she could speak the medical language. So
Mm.
she could explain what was happening at the physical level as well as what was happening underneath it at the energetic level. And that was the explanation that was missing from all of my medical training. So I spent the next, I forget, 7 or 8 years. She would come out to Western Massachusetts for 5-day intensives, and I did those on a regular basis. And that was the really the key catalyst for me because not only hearing the words and talking about the concepts, but feeling it, having people do energy work. And things happen, as you guys all know, when somebody puts their hands on you to do Reiki or something. It's not
So
just warmth. It's not just
walk me through this because I'm super fascinated. Like you were coming in, with an upbringing of like your dad was in the medical field, right? So that's your upbringing, right? And then you're also like, okay, you're also have this like, let me question authority. Let me see if there's something outside of the box. And you've also experienced, okay, let me go to India and experience like Eastern medicine. So it kind of built you up a little bit, and now you're sitting in there, talk, for someone teaching energy healing, like what's like what's going on in your mind, and what was the tipping point that got you to be like, there's got to be something to this, because like because you're like I'm thinking the way you're wired, this probably it's like facts, but there's also like a gut feeling, right? That comes with it.
well, see, that's a really important combination right there.
Yeah.
Objective facts are really important, but gut feelings are really important too. So it's been important to me to read about energy healing, but I would have to say, in all honesty, more important was feeling it and having,
Mm.
my colleagues who were training with me during this program. When they put their hands on my shoulder, that it was not just 98.6 degrees of temperature. There was something else that traveled all the way through. So that, it caught my attention. And it didn't matter how skeptical everybody else was back at work. I knew what I experienced. And this
Mm.
kind of became the challenge, is how to bring those two worlds together. And I don't know, I chose or ended up in Boston, which is a very academic, intellectually oriented place, and it was not very hospitable to these energy type of concepts. But fortunately, looking back on it, I ended up in pain management, working with people who have chronic pain. And the situation there is that regular doctors admit that they can't help these people, that we don't know what to do. So they would kind of send them to our clinic and say, go ahead, you can do whatever you want, try it. I don't really care as long as it helps. And the patients were the same way. Nothing else works. I'll try it. If you want to stick needles in me, if you want to put your hands on my shoulders. And so that turned out to be the perfect setting, because at Spalding, the particular clinic that I worked at, there happened to be, coincidentally, a bunch of occupational therapists and nurses and physical therapists who had had outside training in these energy modalities, as well as having the legitimate mainstream credentials. So that really gave us a lot of validity and acceptance. And so we began doing these treatments with the patients, and they started to do really well. Our focus was on what we called self-management. So it
Mm.
wasn't that the doctor was the hero and gave some magical medicine and the guy got better. It was we taught them techniques that they could manage their own nervous system and manage their own energy system. And that really resonated. It was very empowering. Apart from
Mm.
the energy bit, just empowering the person to know that they could be responsible for their own health. And it sounds odd, but that was not part of the medical training. It wasn't that health came from within. It was that health came from the prescription that your doctor wrote for you, which is it's very captivating when you're the doctor and you're put up on a pedestal and all, but after a while it sort of falls apart. So the chronic pain forum was an ideal place to do it. And it turns out there were other people around the country who were interested in these approaches, and a lot of doctors too. There was an organization called the American Holistic Medical Association back 30 years ago, whatever. And so it's been a gradual growth. But for me, the energy piece is what puts it all together, because Western medicine does, they view the human body as as a machine, a very
Yeah.
complicated machine with all these different, like the heart is a pump and the eye is a camera, and it's very mechanical, but nothing ties it all together. And that's where the energy really came in. And, literally all the other healing traditions in the world have this idea of an invisible healing energy that unifies it and makes it work coherently. We don't, but that's changing a lot now. So I'm really glad to see that change happen.
Yeah. So what are your views now that you've seen the allopathic model and then now the energy world when it comes to how does it all play? And then also probably talking about, how it works with the body, with the body's, self-healing mechanisms, because we have it as well within. But what's your view now, looking back in the last 40 years? How do you view it all? What's your paradigm?
Well, I think I've got a more balanced paradigm than I used to have. Like for example, I don't actually remember how long it was ago, like 20 years ago or something. I tore the ACL ligament in my knee through
Yeah.
a biking accident. And honestly, my first thought was, well, I can just do some guided imagery and meditation and self-healing and, be fine. But, I realized that that was a little bit of a stretch. So I had surgery and surgery worked and I can, I'm fine now. So surgery has its place, but it's not the be all and end all. And that's where the self-healing part comes in. And that's where people learning to do their energy maintenance, it makes a
Mm.
huge, huge difference. And it's just so interesting how much has changed since medical school. Um, Nobody talked about, for example, meditation back then. I can remember asking after, different lectures, Professor, what effect would meditation have on this particular syndrome? And nobody knew. There was like two papers in the whole literature, and now you can find hundreds and hundreds of really good research on the effect of meditation on this, 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 and this. So it's come a long way. Things like yoga, um, that was, kind of what's a nice way of saying it, the weirdos would do yoga or look into vegetarian or organic foods. And now it's not mainstream, but it's really widely accepted. And
Yeah.
that to me it's just phenomenal. It's so gratifying to see how the culture has changed. It's not all the way there. And it's still the primary focus of medicine is on the medications, the surgeries, but
Mm.
lifestyle is important too. So I overall I'm really impressed looking back on how much things have changed for the better.
Yeah, it's definitely the things that were not accepted or not talked about before. And now it's like, people have movements, books, groups, like workshops, events, and it's more, like, it's more normalized. So looking back, what do you think, are some of the most fascinating, you know, r- things in your research that you saw when it came to energy? Because energy healing, when you probably got into it, you're like, shoot, I experienced this, but now I want to bridge the gap so people can believe it. But I bet there was a part of your brain that was like, are there things that prove it, or are there things that studies that can link to show that this is true? Like, what are some of your favorite ones that are like fascinating to you? I'd love to know.
Yeah, it's a good question because as I look back on it, there was one particular patient encounter that really was the tipping point for me.
Mm.
By way of background, I had learned there's a form of energy balancing called therapeutic touch.
Yep.
Um, that was sort of before Reiki, it was the best known, and it was adapted for nurses and the healthcare
Mm.
professions to use. And in a nutshell, eh, just as a quick demo, it doesn't quite show up on the screen here. Oh, here. It's backwards. Yeah. I'm not handling the mirror image right, but if you put your hands, start far apart and bring them together
Yep.
and go like this, you'll feel something
Yep.
between your hands, even when you're like a foot apart. So it's not the temperature, it's not the wind movement, and many people describe it as pressure or tingling, something like that. So I came to believe that that was the outer boundary of your aura or biofield, as they call it in the medical term for it now is biofield. So therapeutic touch is a process of smoothing out your client or your patient's biofield, and you can feel areas where it's tingling or something isn't right, and that will often correlate with where they have their pain problem. So I didn't use it that often, but it was there to be available. So there was one particular gentleman in our program. He was in his mid-30s. He had formerly been very athletic, but suffered a crush injury at work that required his partial amputation of a leg. Part of his leg had to be amputated.
Wow.
So he developed this pain condition that's called phantom limb pain, which is the sensation not only that the limb is still there, but it's very, very painful. And it's sort of notorious for not responding to the usual, even our stress management approaches didn't help this fellow. So I said to him, Jim, you want to try something? It's a little, just if you lie down on the examining table, close your eyes and relax. I'm just going to smooth things out. So he closed his eyes and relaxed, and I did this smoothing out thing over his body. And for some reason, I'm still not sure why I did it. I continued that smoothing out over his empty space where he took his prosthesis off and there was just empty space there. But I felt that same pressure sensation that we can feel here. I felt that over his phantom leg, even though, I was a foot away from any tissue or muscles or bones. So for me, that was like, whoa. But then he opened his eyes and he said, Doc, what are you doing? He could feel me touching his phantom, which,
Wow.
shouldn't happen because the regular model of phantom pain is that something about the nerves in the stump of the leg or the cortex is manufacturing signals. There's a neuroscience model for it, but it wouldn't explain what I had just experienced. So and so then I continued the smoothing out process, and he could feel the pain as though it was a liquid draining out the bottom of his phantom foot. So that alone would have been mind-boggling. But then the other dimension was that partway through, he asked me to stop. He did
Hmm.
not want his pain to disappear. And his explanation was very poignant because he said if the pain disappeared, he wouldn't have any sense that his leg was there. And he'd really have to
Oh.
confront the fact that he was an amputee. If he had some pain, that gave him the at least illusion that at some
Mm,
level he was still whole. So, I had to honor that. Part of me wanted to make it all better, but from his point of view, it was better for him overall to have some pain, which took a
mm,
while for me to kind of understand. But the main point was that I think his phantom was an actual thing. It's
mm,
something out there in space, a field, as they call it, like a magnetic field,
mm,
or as the term has come to be used, a biofield. And for me,
mm,
that was like a key concept that I've been working on and writing about ever since then, because it turns out a lot of people with a phantom limb pain, it arises because of the psychological trauma of the amputation. That it's emotionally, obviously, very upsetting, whether it's from an automobile accident or surgery to lose your limb. And
mm,
so, most often, people don't have a chance to address this emotional loss, this trauma. So we were using some common energy techniques. Not that actually they're self-healing techniques that people may be familiar with tapping, the EFT, where people tap on their own acupuncture points to release the built up energy from stress. And so I would teach that tapping technique to other phantom limb patients. And when they would address, how scary the automobile accident was, or how ashamed they were to be missing a finger or something like that, when they could address those intense emotions and drain away that stuck energy, they would literally be going, whew, and I couldn't see it, but you could literally see the energy leaving their system, and the pain would gradually dissipate. So I
mm,
came to see phantom pain as an actual energy blockage in the biofield. And
mm,
that's been something that I've been trying to elucidate more clearly over the years because I mean, there's been very compelling case examples and theoretical explanations, but what I really would like, and it's been very surprisingly difficult to obtain, is to get a photograph of a phantom limb. Now, I don't know how many of you were fans of the X-Files back however many years ago it was, but part of their intro, they would have, it's called a Kirlian photograph. It was like a
yep,
picture of a hand and you could see the glow around the fingers and all. And that was a form of imaging that would allow you to visualize the electrical field around living objects. And usually they were thin things like leaves or hands because of how the plates are set up in the equipment. And they've done Kirlian photographs of a leaf and done some really interesting things, like if you apply Reiki to a leaf, the field grows and the
yep,
corona expands. So there's ways of documenting the effect of energy healing on living systems.
I've
So
actually
on the way,
seen a study on that too, to where they had leaves and they had and there was it was a laboratory in, I feel like it was in University of Arizona Tucson. Dr. Gary Schwartz was talking about it, and I was actually on the phone with him and his team, and they would have healers, I think from Europe, send healing to this leaf and then capture from the distance healing of it glowing under the Kirlian photography. It was fascinating.
yeah, I mean that's a whole other dimension. It's one thing to say, well, if your hand is right there, there's some kind of magnetism that you're
Yeah.
close enough and that could transmit. And okay, maybe I'll believe that. But to say that somebody 1,000 miles away can have an impact, that's a whole other
Right.
that's next level paradigm shift. But so right, studies like that, and his lab was really instrumental in doing some of this. But one person, I still don't remember why he did this. He cut the tip off a leaf,
Mm.
see what how that would affect the. I actually have. I don't know if this will show up. These are covers of books. Let's see if this shows up.
Oh yeah. Yep.
This is wait, let me see.
Vibrational medicine.
Yeah. So that's a Kirlian photograph of a leaf, of an intact leaf.
Oh wow.
So what would you guess would happen if the bottom tip was cut off? Where would the white glow go? Can you
Most people would probably say it would go
write your
away,
answer?
right?
What's that?
Most people probably would say it would go away. Yeah.
Go away or just follow the contour of the
Right.
the leaf. But what actually happens is this,
Wow.
that somehow or other the phantom is still there, the corona is still there, even though the leaf is gone. So it's
Mm.
not something that the leaf is emitting. It's not like a light bulb glowing. It's
Mm.
something it's already there. I mean, what I've come to see is that it's the invisible template, and the leaf actually grows around the template.
Mm.
So it's kind of flips what you would normally see, and it's a lot like I bet most of you in probably seventh or eighth grade, you did the science experiment with a magnet. You put the magnet underneath a piece of paper, and the teacher sprinkled iron filings on it, and you tap the paper, and the filings form this really beautiful geometric pattern that shows the magnetic field and the lines of force.
Mm.
If you could sort of compare that to well, if you take away some of the iron filings, the lines of force are still there. You just can't see them. So the
Mm.
comparison I make is that the iron filings are comparable to the cells in our body. And the cells in our body line up in accordance with this biofield template of energy. If you take away some of the cells, like amputate a finger, it's like removing some of the iron filings, but the energy field is still there, the same way that the
Mm.
magnetic field is still there. So
Okay.
it's which comes first. And I really have come to think that the biofield comes first,
First.
and the body, the physical body, is like
Mm.
this, sprinkling the iron filings
Right.
on the field to grow.
Yeah, and I've always thought about that as well, is like the field is what affects the matter, right? It comes because it's like, that's how I've always thought about it. And it's really interesting. So because now, like, we in our community we call it the auric field, right? Energetic field, but it's now
Right.
called biofield. So how would you describe biofield from a scientific perspective?
Well, I think biofield is like a first step attempting to understand what some of the, esoteric traditions have
Mm.
known in detail for thousands of years. That, for example, I had studied a little bit in the yoga tradition, and they have a model of the different sheaths, the
Mm.
koshas, they call them, that there's the physical body, and then there's a energy body, emotional
Mm.
body, mental body, soul body, and
Mm.
and transpersonal bodies as well. The ironic thing is that the energy body for them, the etheric body, as some call they consider it to be part of the physical body. For
Mm.
them, it's obvious that it's a very physical, solid, concrete substance. For us, it's the most exotic thing you can imagine. And yet it's really only a tiny first step in the whole spectrum of all these energies. So biofield's an important first step in understanding it. And some of the biofield is known physical forces like electricity and magnetism, but
Yep.
some of it is also this, you know, the woo-woo etheric energy or prana or chi.
Right.
Every tradition has a word for it, except for us. And I think that's what we're just now
Yeah.
starting to understand, that it's more than electricity and magnetism. We don't quite know what it is. We don't have good ways of measuring it directly, but some of the clinical studies that work with this energy produce phenomenal results. So there's definitely something going on.
Right. And how would you describe the difference between, because you probably have seen it, right? Like people talk about placebo effect and then energy work. And I feel like, there's the body self-healing mechanism. And my personal belief is like your intention can trigger that, or energy work external can trigger that. But what it does, it triggers the self-healing mechanisms. What are your thoughts on both of them?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly true. And I think even things like the placebo effect are
Mm,
forms of energy medicine. Because
mm,
if you have a positive hope, a positive expectation,
mm.
that shifts your energy field right there. You
Yep.
you you pull away, you release some of your blocks,
Mm,
and then the natural flow will continue. As you say, the self-healing mechanism of the body is unimpeded energy flow. And if it really comes down to you're having faith in this healer because so many people have said good things about him, fair
yep.
enough. If it's because he's got charisma and he reminds you of some, religious figure in your tradition, fair enough. But also, as
Yeah.
well, in addition, there is whatever energetic mechanism he or she is emitting and working with. So it's a combination, and I think we have to admit that healing is a good word is multidimensional. It happens at
Mm,
many different levels at once, and Western medicine was totally focused on the pill and what chemical was in that capsule that you ingested. And it's taken a while. I mean, it used to be that if you said something had a placebo effect, that was really a big put down. It will say it's not really
mm,
real, it's just a placebo effect. But now
yeah.
we realize there's actually research on the placebo effect, ways to enhance it because it's part of the healing process. And if you can generate a stronger placebo response, fine. If that helps people get better quicker, then what's not to like?
Yeah, and what's funny because we have a lot of folks that go and do our energy healing work, and some of them are very, very skeptical. They're negative, they don't believe it, but they're open. They show up. They're still there, and still things still change. So in my mind, when I saw that, I was like, that is crazy to where it's like someone that's like literally like, and I have had people that have come to our events, like they're in the front row, they're writing down stuff. And I thought they're just being studious. And the whole time they're like, Oliver, I was just writing stuff to prove you wrong or whatever. Right. And then they still experience stuff. But for me, that was fascinating when I saw that the mind was against it and they could still experience results. Right. To where I
Yeah,
was like, what
no.
do you call that? If it's like, because placebo, I thought the mind had to be involved, right? Like thinking it would work. But what if the mind thinks it won't work, but it still works?
Well, I mean, not everything going on in the mind is conscious. So
True.
part
True.
part of their mind is saying blah blah blah. This is blah, blah. But another part is saying, finally, I'm here. This is where I belong, and they just may
Mm,
not be consciously aware of that. The fact that their body was sitting in the chair in front of you says
true.
something about what their core belief was. So, yeah, and skeptics are fine. I enjoy working with skeptics if they're open-minded. Many
Mm.
people are just really, really set in their beliefs, and it's very important to them to have those beliefs and to hold on to them. And I'm at the point now where I say, what I don't know what the right expression is, but fair dinkum. But no, it's you have that privilege to choose your own beliefs. And I much prefer working with people who are at least interested in considering a shift. They don't have to be total, gung ho. Although those are even more fun to work with people who are gung ho about it. But yeah, and it comes around. I know people who back 20 years ago thought it was uh is I can't I was gonna say BS. Okay, BS. We thought it was BS, but who now say, well, I saw some studies that were very convincing. My sister-in-law got acupuncture treatment. She did really well. I finally went and had a free Reiki at the neighborhood center, and there may be something to it. So it's a transition,
Yeah.
and not everybody's going to make that transition, and that's fair enough. We each have our own path and our own trajectory. But I mean, just the fact that as I look down this, you have 386 people here. That's like mind-boggling to see that there's that many people who are open to this stuff and really want to learn about it. And it's just so
Yeah.
gratifying to see. And that's where social media is a really big advance over what was possible, say, 20 years ago or something like that. So
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing. I feel like more people are open to it than ever before, and I think it is in a lot of ways an experiential thing as well. Because unless um, unless you experience it, people like you wouldn't have been moved until you're like, oh, there's something here that I can't explain because science can't explain or medicine can, but this is the unexplained. But I can explain it because I feel it, right?
yeah, yeah. No, and it's lost a lot of the negative connotation of woo woo that's from California or something like that. More and more people who have some credibility are acknowledging it. Plus, another important factor is that things are not working out so well for the world as a whole these days.
Yeah,
And the way we've been doing things is clearly not working. And, whether it's climate change or political arena or whatever, there's just a lot kind of coming to a head
yeah.
where it's looking like the old ways of doing things just can't handle it, are not up to the task. And I think that also pushes people to consider something different.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing is you also have people that have we people that come to us a lot of times they tried every single thing and nothing's worked and they're like, let me try something else because like nothing else will work. Will this work, right? So you have those folks that like, they've just let the science and everything else has no answers for them, so they're like, what else is out there, right? But yeah, other than the Phantom Limb one, which when I read that and saw that in your interview, I was like, that's a really, for me, it was like, wow, mind blown, right? Are there any other fascinating things for you personally that you're like, whoa, whether it's like external research or personal one that you've experienced, that kind of like for you kind of solidify your belief or took your understanding of energy medicine to the next level?
Well, all right. One thing that was very influential, I grew up in the Boston area,
Yeah,
and pretty much everybody there is a sports fan, whether or not you're a good athlete. I happen to like baseball. The Red Sox was our baseball team,
yeah,
and that particular team had not won a championship for like 86 years until 2004. A lot of things came together. They had a very wonderful season and they won the World Series, which is, interesting in and of itself. But there was also something about the whole sort of mood of New England
right.
that captivated people. You could see that the way the team bonded, the team chemistry,
Mm,
people could get into what athletes call the zone,
yeah,
where their peak performance just flowed out of them. So I got really interested in what are the energetics of this whole process. And I wrote an op-ed in the newspaper, and I thought that was going to be it about can weird science help the Sox? Um, but I had a cousin who's a filmmaker, and he proposed to the team that we do a documentary about all of this. And the Red Sox were very cooperative. So we ended up putting together a film that included interviews with the ball players, what it felt like when they were in the zone, how the fan energy could help them get into the zone, what team chemistry was like. We
right.
also interviewed a lot of the leading scientists on biofield, and there were demonstrations of, for example, I don't know if people are familiar with the Heart Math Institute.
Yep, yep,
Oh, okay, great. So they have this notion, not a notion, I mean, they've explored this phenomenon that when you're feeling emotions like appreciation
yep.
in your heart, it shifts your rhythm into what they call a heart coherence rhythm. And their model is that this affects the magnetic field around you, which
Mm,
can affect other people. So
yes,
we did a test where I was actually, like you could say, a guinea pig. I went to their lab and I was, blindfolded and had earplugs and was connected to their computer.
yep.
and my baseline heart coherence level was being measured. And I didn't know this particular meditation, so I was not good at eliciting heart coherence. And as the research director said, that he said I was being very incoherent at the moment, which I didn't take as an insult because I knew what he meant. But so at then, my baseline was being measured, and then at some point, I think it was four skilled heart math meditators came in, sat behind me, and on a signal, they began doing this heart meditation to see what effect it would have on my readings. And within like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, my heart coherence measurements went through the roof. And it was nothing. I didn't even know how to do it if I wanted to do it
Yep.
voluntarily. So it was like a really clear proof that there's a group energy field. And when
Yep.
people are in alignment with positive
Mm.
emotions like appreciation, it's contagious. And
Right.
what the heart math people have found is that when you're in that state of heart coherence, your mind and body coordination is much improved, and your reflexes are better, and it improves your skill at
Right.
athletic things. So if
Mm.
athletes learned how to be in the zone in that coherent state, they could be in the zone on purpose, not just
Mm.
by accident. And so that was a really fun and eye-opening thing to see how many applications it had, and so many people could relate to that.
So, how many people were around you that were doing that?
There were just four at that moment. Four was enough to make a big shift. But I'm sure people here have been to larger group events where you could feel the group energy. If you go to a concert, for example,
Yeah.
it's just
That's what
that,
that's what I talk. It's so funny because I talk about it. Have you ever been to Sedona?
I have. Yes.
Like, and have you noticed the difference in the energy field there at all? Like, have you noticed like it's like
That's why I went to Sedona to feel those. We can talk about that in a minute too, because the whole thing about Earth energies is a is
yeah?
a fascinating thing.
Let's talk about it because I lived in Sedona. I actually had my first energy activation, one of my very first ones in Sedona, to where it's like afterwards, like, and I started seeing sacred geometry and light and little spheres falling, and I thought I was just hallucinating, but I was like, wow, this is crazy, and it's like, and some people feel it, some people don't, but I'm curious about your experience and thoughts about Sedona and energy fields like that.
Let me just say one more thing about the group energies, because I
Yeah,
think
yeah, please.
the Earth energies is a really cool direction to go. But things like concerts or meditation retreats,
Yep.
political rallies, things like that, you can feel it. And I think that's why people go to these, or conferences of like-minded people. They go because they can feel it. There have actually been some studies, um, not just measuring the impact on the participants and how
Right.
they shift, but the TM people did some. It's actually pretty amazing. Some studies from, this was again probably 20 years ago, when they had a very large conference, and over the course of a month, upwards of 4,000 people gathered together in Washington, D.C. to do meditation, healing meditation,
Wow.
and they tracked the effect on the crime rate in Washington, D.C.
Mm.
They're inside this auditorium, the crime rate is
Right.
out there.
Hmm.
How could there be any interaction? And yet it was an
Right.
exact correlation. As the number of participants increased, the crime rate went down 25%. The violent crime rate went down 25% during that month
Wow.
of
I
retreat.
didn't know that. I
Yeah,
didn't. It's interesting because I have this saying, and I've been saying it for a while. It's like, heal yourself, heal others, heal the world, right? And when I explain it to people, I don't say that it happens, you know, sequentially. I think it happens simultaneously, and I've seen this effect to where I'll have a mom that will come to me and it's like, hey, Oliver, I need your help. I need to heal my husband or heal my son. They're going through addiction or grief, and I'm like, all right, let's go heal yourself. Focus on yourself. Go all in on yourself for 90 days and just see what happens. Right. So they work on their field, they work on their field, they work on their field. Next thing family gets better, son gets better. And and
right.
and for me, the way I look at it is, if we can go into a crowded mall, and if somebody can affect you negatively, there's two sides of the story. You can be, when you raise your vibration, your field can also affect them positively, and there's a ripple effect that we never see, because you never know what happens when their field is better and who they affect, right? And there's this ripple effect that happens that we never know how deep or how wide it goes. But I believe that as people start healing themselves, it starts affecting their family, and then the family circle, and then their circle. Next thing you know, it's like the city, like you're saying, right? And then the world.
Yeah, no, those great examples. I think the ripple effect is an excellent way of talking about it. I see somebody in the comments had given the name. They call it the Maharishi effect, and they have
Mm,
a formula for so it's what percent of people in a population need to be meditating together in order to have this impact. And the numbers don't quite add up, but but just the concept of it is really beautiful because it shows that we're all interconnected, and you
mm,
don't even have to say anything to somebody
mm.
to have an impact. And we've all had that experience. You're kind of grumpy and you're walking down the street, and somebody smiles at you as they walk by, and that, however it does. You also don't need to see the person smiling at you to feel the
Mm.
impact. That
That
that's
is
the
true.
that's the
But
cool
but
point.
but that's what's fascinating, that study you're talking about with 4,000 meditators coming together, and it affected the crime rate. And if you look at the crime rate, those are people that don't know someone's meditating, right? And they're probably not even in the highest vibration because they're prone to crime, and it just all of a sudden it just dropped,
Yeah.
right? With that stuff, to me, that is fascinating. I've never even heard of it, but I'm like,
Yeah,
wow.
the researcher is a PhD physicist, John Hagelin, as director
Mm.
of research there. He actually for a while formed a political party called the Natural Law Party and
Oh
got,
wow.
got a few 100,000 votes for president back in the day. It's kind of things have changed since then, but I mean that's a whole different view of what society could be like if the focus was on states of consciousness rather than
Right. It's
profit.
funny because a lot of this is a little bit more of our smaller group here, but when we do our healing days, like it's like typically anywhere from 3 to 5,000 people all coming together to heal. And the way I say it is like the feeling that everybody gets in that container, right, is very similar to what I felt in sacred sites, to where everything is amplified. And I tell people is like we're creating sacred site energy. The fact that all your energies are multiplied, and now you're part of this big container that fuels the healing. So I always thought about it that way.
Yeah. Do you meet physically or is it
And
all usually online?
it's fascinating. Most of mine is online.
Yeah,
So
so
it's
that's a whole other dimension how that happens. But
I know, right?
when physical events happen in the same place over a
Right.
period of time, the characteristics of that location change. There was some research that was done by Dr. William Tiller at Stanford University, where he had
Mm,
a room that was set aside just for meditation. Nothing
mm,
else happened between meditations, and over a period of months, this it turns out built up a certain kind of charge so that if a flask of water was put in the room and left overnight, the pH, the acidity level of the water would change because the room had been imprinted or conditioned, as he called it, by the vibe of these
mm.
meditators. So physical spaces can be conditioned by human intention. I don't think that's what's happening at Sedona, though. I think Sedona is a whole other level
Mm.
of where this energy comes from.
But wait, pause real quick because that's fascinating to me. Because I'm like I always knew that. Do you think? Because I've been to places to where you would have like say, have you ever seen Amma the Hugging Saint? They call her the Hugging Saint.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Have you ever met Amma? They call her the Hugging
Oh
Saint,
yeah, yes, right, yeah.
right? So if I met her 20 years ago, but it was interesting to me, like when she would land in LA, even though I was miles away back then, I would feel the energy. And you walk into the halls and you would feel something a little electrifying in the halls. And when
Yeah,
she would leave the next day, you would walk to the same halls and you would feel like it's not the same, but you can feel it's a little different, right? So do
yeah,
you think it lasts, the change in the environment, and how long does it last when it's like when you do it, or what were the studies on that?
yeah. No, that's true. There's an initial charge, and if nothing else happens, it will dissipate. But
Right.
if things are done to maintain that energy, like if it's the site where regular practices are done, then it can be
Mm,
sustained. I where I live now is not far from Kripalu, which is a yoga retreat center that has become a center for all kinds of transpersonal growth. But a friend and I went to just we happened to be in the area, went to visit once, and walked into the main auditorium area, and it
Mm.
just felt different. And it was like, whoa. It turns out the
Yeah.
leader, he's no longer there, but it had just been his birthday celebration, and we were feeling the residual charge from all that intense emotional energy. We didn't know
Mm.
it was going to, have happened, but we could feel it. So I think, places like the shrine at Lourdes, for example,
Yep.
is known for miracles happening there. It
Mm.
may be that that cathedral was built on an energy vortex,
What I'm thinking. Yeah.
but a couple hundred years of people worshiping there
Yep.
has charged it up, regardless of what the origins were.
Yep.
Mount Shasta, somebody else is putting down there on the chats. Yeah, there are certain places around the world where this phenomenon happens. Not
Mm.
everybody will notice it. People
Yep.
can go to Sedona and say, "Well, it's very pretty," and look at the canyons and all that, and not know what you're talking about. People are attuned differently,
Yep.
and some people are, very much in their heads and just aren't connected to their energy bodies well. So it's great that they can enjoy the scene, the vista. But
Yeah.
there are these places with this special energy, and that's what I've gotten most interested in.
Yeah.
Uh,
Let's talk about Sedona. Like, what do you think is different with a place like Sedona? Like, you've been there, you felt it, and you probably like started studying it and somehow as well. I'm fascinated with your take on it.
well, I think the way I've find most helpful to think about it is that human beings have like acupuncture meridians and chakras. Animals have acupuncture meridians and chakras. And in the
Yep.
book, I have a picture of a horse acupressure meridian chart that the vets use. And it just shows that every living thing has it in some form. So the
Yep.
question is the earth a living being?
Mm.
In our traditional Western approach, it's just a collection of rocks and water and air. It's just no, nothing really holds it together. We're sort of coming around a little bit with the Gaia hypothesis of sort of ecology and everything interconnected. But if you go to the indigenous peoples around the world,
Yep.
the earth is a being that you can have communion with and that has an energy body. And certain places, certain locations on the planet have more of this energy than others. So Sedona is one. Because my wife happens to be British, we've gone to England a lot and have spent time at places like Stonehenge in Avebury,
Mm.
the Neolithic sites, and there's something there. And in fact, somebody has done a dowsing map of southern
Yep.
England where you can connect the dots of all these cathedrals and holy wells and stone circles and stuff, and they're aligned. And the diagram looks just like an acupuncture diagram.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Did you ever go visit the crop circles?
Well, that's yes, that's where it leads. I mean,
Where go?
fortunate
How
enough
did
to
you feel? Did you feel anything different with your field when you were in that space?
Yeah, I mean the first thing that you have to say is it's just awesome.
Yeah.
Whether that's a cognitive reaction or an energetic reaction or a spiritual reaction, I don't really know where it comes from because it's just so otherworldly,
Yeah.
in a literal sense. So, just by background for folks who may not know that in this region of southern England that has a lot of the stone circles, over the last 30 years, there have been these formations in the wheat fields that appear within the course of an hour or two, where some of the wheat stalks lie down and others stay up in a way that creates a pattern that you can see from above. And these
Mm.
are huge. They'll be like 300 feet across, very complicated geometric designs and mathematical precision. And it's been called a crop circle. And initially the media tried to make it sound like it's some guy did it in the evening when he
Yeah.
was looking, sort of thing. But they're just so phenomenally beautiful and awesome that there's more to it. So you were asking about what's the energetics of it. I've had a chance to see probably three at least that were freshly made, and at this point, the farmers would allow people to go in. There's been a whole thing about the tourists sort of trampling so much the crops that it's not it actually damages the productivity of the field for the farmer. But I did have a chance to sit in and meditate inside a crop circle, and my experience was it was like it sped up the process that
Yeah.
I sort of had a feel that usually it takes me like 45 minutes to get to this level of inner quiet or awareness or whatever. Within 2 minutes that was happening. So it's not a quantitative measurement or anything, but
But it
the
still
fact that
accelerates because you know how long it takes, and you're like,
yeah, no, right. Yeah, I could definitely feel that. And people are now making more measurements about, excuse me, about what's different electromagnetically in the crop circles and dowsing. Dowsing is not accepted by mainstream science, but I'm sure folks here have had experience with different kinds of.
yeah, dowsing rods. They didn't use that to find like oil and water back in the day as well, right?
Well, not just back in the day, it's still widely used. I mean, I'm in New England, I'm in Western Massachusetts, and a lot of people trying to find where to drill for a water well, they'll hire a dowser. Oil companies hire dowsers
Yeah.
to
It's
find
funny.
water.
One of my friends actually was telling me about, I forget his name now, this guy that not only can he douse where the water is, but he could improve the well production. And I was like, I'm gonna hire that guy because we live in that we have some wells in here. He's like, yeah, he's been hired by a lot of companies and too, but he can just, I don't know how he does it, but he increases the well production. I'm like, all right, talking
That's
to that guy.
that's pretty cool. I hadn't heard that one. I mean, I know that they can tell how deep you have to drill to get to the well, and they've actually done some tests where the dowsers are not told. The experimenters know where the wells will be, but the dowsers
Mhm.
are not told, and their accuracy is really really high if they're skilled at it.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. And yeah, I mean, like, so you said you did some research on sacred sites as well? Like,
Yeah, I am not I bought a pair of dowsing rods and brought them along
yeah.
without having any training to speak of. But put it this way, even I could detect what was happening. At the stone circle that we tend to go to is one called Avebury. It's not
Mm,
far from Stonehenge, but Stonehenge you can't just go up to the stones now and touch them. You used to be able to, but it's more fenced
like
off.
it, yeah.
At
Yep.
Avebury, you can still wander among the stones. It's not the stones aren't as quite as high, but
Mm,
it's spread out over a much larger area. So, there are sheep grazing in the field right. They're grazing right next to the the stones. So we like to go there, and we did some dowsing there. And um, the main thing I was able to detect was how far any individual stone's field extended out.
mm,
So when the rods splay open like that is when you're coming into the boundary of it.
right.
So I could reliably map out
The
about
field.
25, 30 feet around air radius from the stone. People who are skilled dowsers can detect the connection from one stone to the next around
Another.
the circle. There's several bands across the connections. So it's a very, complex and detailed anatomy, if you will. Um, I'm not at that level, but just even putting my toe in that water, I could tell that there was a lot going on. So I think that's a really cool thing. And then the whole thing with crop circles is where do they come from, and what is the source of these patterns and that imprint themselves somehow or other on the fields. And I have never seen a UFO, um, but to me, the most compelling explanation is that it's a non-terrestrial form of intelligence that has the
Well, we should probably
technological
take you to
ability
a
to do it.
to Sedona because they do UFO tours and they give you military grade binoculars,
Oh
right?
wow.
And laser pointers, and they will explain to you how, hey, if you see an aircraft and it blinks two or three times, like commercial, military, and they're gonna even say, here's how the satellites, here's how they work, and here's how UFOs are, and they go in this pattern and then this, or they disappear, or there's a formation, or they beam up. So I took I took a bunch of friends to do that. And I remember like the first few times I did it, I was super skeptical because I was like, and I was looking at it with my binoculars. I'm like, and they were like, oh, we found one, we found one. So we're all doing this. And I was like, oh, maybe these things are rigged. Let me look at it with my real eye. And I was like, this. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's still there. Maybe it's something in the drink, but
Yeah. Yeah.
we've seen them go that, we've seen them beam up, and I'm like, that's fascinating, right? But they
Yeah.
do a lot of these in Sedona. The spots in Sedona where they do a lot of them, and
Uh,
it's just like it's an experience.
no, I'm sure. Yeah. And, certain regions are meant to attract the UFOs, and Area 50, 51, or 52, I forget which one it was, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that sort of thing. And, in the book, I have some quotes from channeled sources explaining why it makes sense to think of the crop circles as a very benign and awe-inspiring intervention by other intelligences that's not meant to instill fear,
Yep.
but to, move us beyond our stuck ways of being into a sense of awe. If people are interested, the website, it's www.themysteryoflifeenergy.com, has a lot of resources that include photographs of crop circles. There's one that's a video of a flyover, an aerial flyover. It's just it's very cool. And
It's the mystery. Let's say it again. It's www.themysteryoflifeenergy.com.
yes.
Themysteryoflifeenergy.com. If somebody from the team can put that in the chats, that would be amazing. And actually,
Yeah,
I have
that'd
your
be.
book here. Here you go. The
Oh, great.
Mystery
Thank
of
you.
Life Energy. If you guys get this book on Amazon, it's such a good, and fascinating read, and anybody's into energy, right? The Mystery of Life Energy, biofield healings, phantom limbs, group energetics, and Gaia consciousness. So what is Gaia consciousness? What's your no?
It's funny you should say
This is
that.
the group. This is the group for that. We're
It's funny you
open.
should say that, because that's actually the term that my publisher wanted to go with that I did not want to go with.
What did you want to go? What did you want to go with?
I want to say either earth energies or global consciousness, and
There you go.
they combine the two together. So I don't actually know what it means. No,
It
it's
is
the idea that the earth has her own
ener-
beingness,
energy
and
field.
that
Yeah.
we can learn to commune with it. In the book, I talk about how I happen to live now in a place in Western Massachusetts that has a lot of these, what they call the ley lines, the energy
Oh
lines.
yeah. Yep.
And
Yeah.
I didn't know that at the time when we decided to move here, but it turns out it attracts a certain kind of person here. The people who live here are more into like organic agriculture and
Yep.
creative endeavors and things like that. So, like Sedona, we're not known for the vortexes, but we are known for being a little bit out in left field in some in some areas. So yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. All right, Rick. People are asking about your website again. What is it again? Let's say it one more time.
It's www.themysteryoflifeenergy.com.
Yep. The miss. So it's the same name as your book.
Yes. How
All right, guys.
convenient. How
I would,
convenient.
if you guys enjoy this, I would, and you want to dig deeper into Rick's work and just research, just get his book, The Mystery of Life Energy.com. You can get it on Amazon, and it's something that I've read, and I'm not a reader. I've read this, and check out his website as well. And Rick, thank you so much. Our community and really enjoyed this. Everybody, let's give him a round of applause or shake your hands. Give Rick some love. Thank you so much. Any last words, Rick?
Oh, thank you. I would just say thank you. I've really enjoyed sharing the information and this energy with you guys, and it's a great community that you've got, Oliver. Thank you for pulling that together.
Amazing. All right. Thank you so much for being here. Everybody else, thanks for being here, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it.